Hello, everyone. My name is Matt, as Holly said, and I work at Acre Frameworks. I've been a development coach for about 7 years now, which makes me feel old. And I'm accredited through the International Coaching Federation. And I guess a little bit about me is I'm married. I've got my first kid on the way in February, so I'm anticipating getting no sleep after that. I'm also massively into football. I'm a Liverpool fan, so if anyone has been following Premier League football recently, you might understand why I'm quite happy. Don't let that be a reason why you turn off now, if you're not a Liverpool fan. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm just really excited to take you through an introduction to the growth mindset today. I've got a background of coaching young adults into work, social workers in schools, and now health and safety and sustainability professionals. And I can confidently say that the growth mindset is relevant to all and to everyone. As I said, I work for Acre Frameworks, and Acre Frameworks is part of a global leading recruitment company called Acre. You may have heard of it. It's leading in health and safety and sustainability recruitment, and it's been around for about 18 years. We've got offices in London, Amsterdam, and now New York as well, which is exciting. And Acre Frameworks has grown out of Acre as a learning and development consultancy, specifically working with purpose-led professionals in the health and safety and sustainability sectors. So my job is really to help others get curious about their behaviours and to think about how their behaviours in work contribute or don't contribute to their wider team's performance, which is quite fun. This quote really caught my eye. Mastering others is strength, mastering oneself is true power. And I think that's a nice segue between what we do at Acre Frameworks and the essence of the growth mindset that we're going to look at today. And this image here really is that battle between the head and the heart. And so often we might want to do one thing, but then the heart or the head pulls against it and we can feel caught, conflicted in between. And today we're definitely going to sort of dive a little bit into that. My intentions for today's session are that you would leave understanding a little bit more about the growth mindset, whether you've heard about it before, whether you've lectured other people on it, or whether this is the first time that you've sort of encountered this mindset. My hope is that you'll leave with more. Also to model ways that you might start applying it in your journey, whether that's professional or personal. And also to explore the growth mindset and how that impacts on our self-talk. And what I mean by self-talk is that inner voice, that narrator that no one else can hear, but so often it can prompt whether we follow through and do something or whether we shy away. That sort of little voice is, you can't do that, or go for it, what's the worst that can happen? I want to inspire you to think differently and to take action in new ways, and also to hold a non-judgmental space for self-exploration over the next 45, 50 minutes. And my hopes from you, what would I like to see from you? It's quite a weird question because I'm not seeing you. This is a webinar, but would be to stay open-minded and willing to receive challenge, to bring your full self to this webinar, in brackets on Menti, and I'll explain in a minute, but we're going to be using Mentimeter to interact with each other. The good thing about Menti is it's completely anonymous. So I just encourage you to be bold, to be courageous, to be honest with yourself and with others as you kind of put some of your reflections up there, and that will just help us to go a little bit deeper today. My hope is that you'll remember that learning never stops, no matter where you are in your career. Whether you're recently new to the world of work or you've been working for many, many years, the growth mindset especially holds that assumption that there's always more and that learning can always be taken deeper. I want to invite you to be extra curious today and to have a bias for action so that you can start putting some of that learning into action. So I want to turn the tables on you to get kick-started today and ask you the question, what, if anything, do you already know about the growth mindset? And the way you'll be able to respond is through Menti. I think Holly may have shared in the chat, or may be about to share in the chat, how you can access on the website. But if you've got a smartphone, the easiest way is bring up your camera and scan this QR code, and it will take you directly to that question. So I'll just leave this up here for just a moment. And as I said before, the growth mindset really is applicable to absolutely anyone and everyone. Having worked with young adults who are looking to get into work either for the first time or who'd been sort of in and out of employment, with children in schools and also professionals in the health and safety sustainability world, this is really applicable. So I'm really excited to see what you get from this today. Okay, fantastic. So this is a word meld that comes through, and it will sort of push through the different responses that people are putting out there. So little, nothing, not too much. Continue to excel. That's definitely part of the growth mindset, like that pushing, that continuing to push yourself and develop. Challenge, a big part of it for sure. Self-actualization, yeah, I like that word. Process, yeah, that rings a bell. Process, that sort of nothing happens necessarily in a day, but it's a process. It's about embracing that journey. Great, please keep adding to this. Actually, I'll be able to share this at the end. We can go back and have a look at this potentially and see what other responses come up. So I want to pose another question to you now, once again on Menti. What do these famous people all have in common? And just to introduce you to our famous people panel, we've got Michael Jordan, famous basketball player from the 1990s. If you're from my generation, you might be familiar with the film Space Jam. Michael Jordan won it all, basically, during that era, highly successful sportsman. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. If you haven't read Harry Potter or watched any of the films, highly recommend. I believe it's 20 years since the first film came out this week, which ages me. Oprah Winfrey. Oprah is a media tycoon in the States, and she sits down with some of the most famous and influential people and sort of interviews them and gets down into their story, into the difficulties that they face, but also the good things that they're doing in the world. And Thomas Edison, someone you may not have seen a picture of, he invented the light bulb, so he's sort of looking very proud in that picture, staring at his creation. All right, so here are some of those responses. So what do they all have in common? That they're self-made, that they're dedicated to their craft, that they're incredibly successful. They all have struggled and have a good mindset. No qualifications when leaving school. So inspirational, absolutely. So the thing that unifies all of these celebrities, famous people, however we want to say it, is that they've all failed. They're all successful people, no doubt, but they've all failed in life at one point, one stage or another. Michael Jordan was quoted as saying, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." For J.K. Rowling, she was a divorced single mum on benefits, forced to move country to escape her threatening ex-husband, and she arrived in Edinburgh to live with her sister with just a couple of chapters of the Harry Potter book in her pocket. Today, she's got a net worth of £820 million. And a fun fact, that's more than the Queen, apparently. And I'm not saying that money is success, but actually J.K. Rowling has sort of really built herself up. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty in rural Mississippi to a single teenage mother. Oprah became pregnant at 14. She was born, and her son was born prematurely and sadly died in infancy. She was then sent away to live with her father in Nashville, Tennessee. And she landed a job in radio while she was still at high school. And by 19, she was a co-anchor for the local evening news. Her often sort of emotional and exemplary delivery eventually led to her transferring to the daytime talk show arena. And after boosting a third-rated local Chicago talk show to first place in its region, she launched her own production company, which today is worth $2.6 billion. And Thomas Edison, as I said, created the light bulb. What I haven't said is that he failed 10,000 times before he, on that 10,001st experiment, the light bulb worked, bing, it went on. I mean, that's some serious dedication right there. So that is what these four all have in common. Let me introduce you to Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist and is considered the pioneering figure in the study of human motivation. She's a professor of psychology at Stanford University, and Dweck is best known for her research on motivation, personality, and mindset. She suggests that people who believe that intelligence is inherent and unchangeable hold what is known as a fixed mindset, whilst those who believe that their abilities hinge on training and effort hold a growth mindset. And those are the two mindsets we're going to look at today. Dweck believes that this tendency to view ability as fixed or malleable can have a profound impact on almost all the areas of a person's life, especially the motivation to achieve. Such mindsets, she believes, can also be fostered through interactions during early childhood, and she did a lot of sort of experimentation and kind of research with children in schools. And children that are praised for their efforts as opposed to their innate abilities are often more likely to develop a growth mindset. And I love this quote from her. She says, "Did I win? Did I lose? Those are the wrong questions. The correct question is, did I make my best effort? If so, you may be outscored, but you will never lose." And this quote here I also really like. Change can be tough, but I've never heard anyone say that it wasn't worth it. And I want to introduce that concept of change right at the beginning of today's session. I really like this image. I think it accurately describes most people's relationship with change, or at least it describes my relationship with change, if I'm being honest. On the left-hand side, we've got sort of what change looks like when it's easy. We think, right, I want to learn something new. I go away, I find a method, and then I practice and I improve, and maybe I practice a little bit more, but get to the point where we're pretty good at something, and we might then decide to push on to the next level because that was easy, or we stop because we're already good enough. On the right-hand side is maybe a more honest reflection of what it's like when change is not straightforward. So you might want to learn something new. You might find that method of learning it the same as before, but actually you make utterly no progress. And at that point, you're faced with a couple of options. Do you dismiss the whole idea of learning that method and that new thing as stupid and walk away from it? Or do you keep going but try something different? But actually, if you fail again, what does that do? And actually down here at the bottom right, this sort of self-talk can begin to come in. What the hell's wrong with me? Why can't I get the hang of this? And all of this leads back up that chain to the top, to the point where we even forget that we thought it was stupid in the first place, stupid to have dismissed it, and we try again, and we get stuck in this cycle of failure. And that's definitely been my experience a lot in life. One particular example that comes to mind was when I was 17 and I was desperate to learn to drive. In the UK, you can get your provisional license at 16, but at 17, you can get behind the wheel and start to sort of learn to drive. And I definitely had that desire up there in the top box. I was badgering my parents, like, please let me drive, please let me drive. I've even found an instructor that I put forward to them. So I started to learn. And actually, if I'm honest, I was on that easy path at the beginning. I thought, I'm getting this. My instructor's giving me feedback saying that I'm doing well. I even got insured on my parents' little car. And my dad took me out for hours driving around the local neighborhoods. I booked in my test, and I even told all of my friends, I'm going to pass this first time. I'm going to be giving you a lift next week. Where do you want to go? Let me know. I thought it was easy. I thought I got it nailed. I woke up on the day of the test. It was a day in January. I opened my bedroom curtains and it's snowing. And I'm thinking, damn, this is going to be difficult, but oh well, got to give it a try. Um, the test was going well, then I approached a roundabout. I found roundabouts really difficult whilst I was learning to drive, judging when to go, when to wait. And I just got too hasty and just went for it. Blocked off another car that was coming around the roundabout. He was beeping his horn at me. And at that moment, I knew I'd failed. I knew the instructor wasn't going to let me pass. The worst thing is you have to finish the test, even if you're halfway through. So I had another 20 minutes worth of driving, knowing that I'd failed, and all this self-talk came into my head. You're rubbish, you're embarrassment, you've let yourself down, you've let your parents down. And I actually got a nosebleed halfway through, and it just sort of started gushing out my nose as I was, I think, just so dejected. The driving instructor was so freaked out, and he's like, "Do you want me to take over, mate?" I was like, "No," shoved the tissue up my nose, finished the job, but lo and behold, I failed quite badly. I went again, I booked another test, got to a roundabout, a different roundabout, but made the same mistake and failed for a second time. And at this point, I was just living in that bottom right-hand corner. What the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And I offer that story as a sort of segue into the fixed and the growth mindset, which is what we're sort of really here for today, not to hear about how I failed my driving test. So the fixed mindset is the first of the two mindsets, and we actually really need to understand the fixed mindset before we can look at the growth mindset. So the fixed mindset holds the assumption that intelligence is static. You have what you have, and there's nothing you can do to increase that intelligence or decrease it, but you have what you have. And this leads to a desire to look smart and a tendency, therefore, to face challenges by avoiding them. Actually, there's no point challenging yourself because it might show that you really don't have the intelligence to overcome that challenge. And if our intelligence is static, then we want to protect, we want to preserve, we don't want others to see that we can't manage that challenge. In the face of obstacles, somebody in that fixed mindset would be really likely to give up easily, because once again, if you don't try, you don't run the risk of showing that weakness, that fallibility. In terms of effort, well, somebody in the fixed mindset would see effort as fruitless, or worse, as worthless, because if we are fixed, if we have what we have, what's the point of even trying? In the face of criticism, somebody in that fixed mindset would likely ignore criticism, even if it was like negative criticism. They'd likely just throw it out. Well, that's your view, that's not mine, I'm not going to listen. And then in terms of the success of others, somebody in that fixed mindset would likely feel threatened by that success of others because it would be showing their inadequacy, the areas that they lack in. And the fixed mindset is all about lack. It's all about that glass half empty, not having enough, so therefore saving face, preserving, trying to look smart. And you can see that as a result, somebody who lives from this fixed mindset, and I'm going to say living from because we often live from both at different points, but somebody who's mainly in that fixed mindset is likely to plateau in life. They're likely to achieve less than their full potential because they're constantly playing it safe. And all of this will confirm what is known as a deterministic view of the world. Deterministic, everything is determined, it's already set in place, nothing can change. Oh, whoa, let's look at the growth mindset. Let's feel optimistic. So the growth mindset is the opposite, as you can imagine. And it holds the assumption that intelligence can be developed. And this leads to a desire to learn and a tendency, therefore, to face up to, for example, challenges as a possibility to embrace, to learn, to test one's ability, one's strengths, and tweak and learn and shift and to kind of flex with it. In the face of obstacles, that growth mindset would persist. Somebody would persist and they would continue to try different things. Thomas Edison comes to mind. 10,000 times he failed, but that 10,001st time, because he persisted, he was able to create the light bulb. which I'm thankful for. In terms of effort, somebody in the growth mindset would see effort as crucial. It's that path to mastery. It's those 10,000 hours to become an expert in your field. It's not something that you can buy or download off the internet. It's something that you just got to earn, and you've got to put the blood, sweat, and tears into. And there's a belief that at some point along that journey, something shifts and you become an expert, you become competent in that skill or that trait or behavior, whatever it is that you're looking to do. In the face of criticism, somebody in the growth mindset would seek to learn, they seek to be curious. We use a phrase at Acre Frameworks, to lean in, to sort of, instead of lean away, to lean in and say, I want to learn more about that. Can you help me understand? And then finally, the success of others would be almost the base level for that person to proceed, that they would take lessons and be inspired by others so that it could act as a baseline for their success. And all of this as a result means that somebody in the growth mindset is likely to achieve higher and higher and higher. There is no limit because we're always growing, we're always developing. So it's not even necessarily that measurable. And all of this leads to a greater sense of free will, of satisfaction, and for somebody to thrive, even though things are challenging. I hope you can believe, like I do, that we can thrive in the face of difficulty. So Carol Dweck designed and coined these two mindsets. And she, as I said before, did quite a lot of research with students in schools, children, but also teenagers. And she went into a high school in America and set them this scenario, set students a scenario and asked them for their responses. And the scenario was, imagine you're walking into school and you go to your favorite lesson. It's a lesson that you're really good at. And in the lesson, your teacher begins to hand out your mid-year results. And you get your result and you look down and you've got a C+, which is an average result. And that's not great because it's a subject that you like and it's one that you think that you're doing very well in. Okay, C+. It's a bit of a frustration. The school day passes. You then go to your car at the end of the day to drive home. You've got a parking ticket on your windshield. The frustration increases. You then get home and you ring up your good friend because you just need to vent. You need to tell them about how bad your day's been. And they blow you off. They're not really listening. They don't seem interested. They kind of rush you off the phone. And you put the phone down and it's kind of like, that was a rubbish day. Like, I'm really frustrated. She posed that scenario to students and then asked them, what would you have felt, what would you have thought, and what would you have done if that was you? And some of the classic fixed mindset responses that she had from some of these students would be, well, I would have thought that I was a failure, that I felt rejected, that I was an idiot. Someone said, well, the world is out to get me, obviously. Life stinks, nothing good ever happens to me. Another person said, well, I would feel like the unluckiest person in the world. Some of those feeling responses were around worthlessness, feeling dumb, everybody's better than me, that comparison piece. And some of those action points that people raised, they said, well, I would have stayed in bed then. I would have given up. I would have eaten loads of chocolate. I would have shouted. I would have cried. Essentially, I'd have done nothing. Alternatively, some students responded differently, though, to that first group. And some said, okay, well, I would have needed to have tried harder in class. I would have needed to be more careful where I park my car. And I probably would have followed up with my friends and checked in with them to see if they'd had a bad day. Someone else said, well, it could have been worse. I could have got an F. I could have crashed my car. And at least my friend didn't reject me outright. Another still said, well, I would have spoken to my teacher. I would have asked them, what could I have done differently next time? And I would have called my friend and actually told them from my perspective what I needed that day. And what I really like about this experiment, not that this research, but also what's come from it, is you don't have to be in one mindset to be upset or frustrated. Who wouldn't be after a day like this, although it's hypothetical, or who wouldn't be if you've failed your driving test twice or whatever that would be? I'm sure you can insert your own experience and scenarios there. But those in the growth mindset don't label themselves. They don't give up. Even if they feel distressed, they're willing to take risks, to confront challenges courageously, and to keep working at themselves. And the good news is, I passed my driving test 3rd time, so it did happen, and I'm a safer driver, thank goodness for that result. Denzel Washington nails the growth mindset in this video. He's a brilliant actor, but he just sums up where his failures could have held him back, but actually how he sort of...
Very wise words from Denzel there. I'll just hand back over to you, Matt.
Wonderful. Thanks,
There
Holly.
we go. We've got your screen again. Thank you.
Great. You've got to take risks. You will fail, you will lose, you will suck at something in life. It's inevitable. Whew. Thanks, Denzel. That's what I wanted to hear. Every graduate here has the training and talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail? If you don't fail, you're not even trying. To get something you never had, you have to do something you never did. Punchy stuff. And he uses this expression, this analogy at the end about these ghosts around your deathbed, and these ghosts are the talents that you never used, the ideas that you never acted upon, the risks that you never took. And he poses that rhetorical question, how many ghosts are going to be around your bed when your time comes? I think it's time for us to be honest with ourselves. And using Menti again, I'd really love it if you could honestly and frankly evaluate yourself along this statement. And it's completely confidential, as I said before, but how consistently do you think you're in the growth mindset? And there'll be a little scale there, a 1 being sort of, a 1 being never, and a 5 being all the time. And if I'm honest, I'm probably somewhere around a 3. I'd like to think that I'm generally in the growth mindset, but I know that a lot of that self-talk that we're going to come onto in a minute, and a lot of those fixed mindset traits, they show up. They just show up almost without volunteering, without even knowing about it. So thank you for those that are putting in your responses now. It's middling there around the 3 at the moment, around the 2.9. I love Menti. I love how it can shift around. For those of you though that have put yourself maybe slightly lower down that spectrum, thank you firstly for your honesty, but also I want you to know that you have the choice. You have the power to develop more of a growth mindset each and every day. And our self-talk is really vital for giving us and giving the growth mindset really the chance to grow. And at the same time, it diminishes the fixed mindset in us as well. And I don't know if you guys have heard of neuroplasticity. I'll come on and talk about that potentially a little bit later on, but actually there's a scientific thing. I'm not very sciencey, but there is science to prove that thinking in a growth mindset way, acting in a growth mindset way, reprograms our brains and makes it easier to be more consistently in this place. So thanks for your honesty there. The sort of middling around that 3.1, which is something I can absolutely relate to as well. I'd love for a moment just for you to imagine that you're in the growth mindset. So you're at that 5 on that scale. And I'd love to know, what do you think your self-talk would sound like when you're in the growth mindset? And once again, by self-talk, I mean that inner narrator, that voice that no one else hears, but can so often show up when we come across a challenge, when we face an obstacle, maybe when others succeed, and we might think, screw you for succeeding. When people criticize us, if we're in the growth mindset, what do you think your self-talk would sound like? What would the things that you would be saying to yourself, or that you would hear in your head to kind of confirm that it's the growth mindset? So yeah, you can do better. No one is better than you. Everything's going great. Give me more encouragement. Nice. Upbeat, positive. How can I make this work? I think that's brilliant. A really positive, action-orientated question. Go for it. Never mind them. You can do this. Yes. Being positive, encouraging, self-accepting. I think that's so important, isn't it? Like, to be accepting and kind towards ourselves. So often we drive ourselves harder than we would drive our colleagues or people that we might line manage, or even our family and friends. It's a small setback, but you can do this. Go you. I can do this. I need this. I want this. These sort of phrases, I will do this, this kind of action-orientated positive phrases. Absolutely. Thank you for all your responses once again. And if I just go to this next slide here, the self-talk that I've sort of tried to introduce here, our self-talk is fundamentally like anchored to our identity, what we think about ourselves, and it can just come out, sprout out into sort of into scenarios and situations, and it can cause us to kind of choose that fixed mindset way of thinking, or we might see ourselves choosing that growth mindset way of thinking. There's always a choice, and that's why I really like that picture that I showed earlier with that quote, with the head and the heart almost pulling against each other, because so often it can feel like that identity battle going on within us. So some kind of identity questions that can show up in self-talk. Firstly, that kind of who am I question, which is fundamental, right, to us as human beings. Who am I? What do I bring? In the fixed mindset, it would be, well, I am who I am, so I can't change. So I'm just going to keep going and do things the way that I've always done them. Whereas in the growth mindset, I can change, I can learn, I can grow. In the face of change, once again, fixed mindset, my traits are fixed. Growth mindset, I'm always evolving. Effort and hard work, they pay off. I think these next two in the middle are really important to speak to as well. In terms of what's the goal, what does like success look like? In that fixed mindset, that self-talk is likely to be like, success is what matters, no other outcome would be successful. You have to like win. Whereas the growth mindset would say, it's about the process, it's about the journey, just as much as it is about the destination. When do I feel smart, capable, and successful? Well, the fixed mindset would say only when I've done something perfectly and only when I've done something better than others. And those voices can show up comparing us to other people, always putting us down, even when we've done something better than we've ever done it before. There's always that, well, compared to somebody else, or, you know, well, it wasn't perfect, so I'm going to punish myself for doing that one thing wrong, even though the rest of it was really good. Whereas the growth mindset would say, when I struggle with something and then I start to figure it out, that's progress, and others' abilities are less relevant than my own. So a lot of this is kind of reinforcing what I've spoken about before, but this self-talk really is where we start to kind of engage with overcoming the fixed mindset and beginning to choose the growth mindset more. So shifting this now to the professional, and this is sort of the last sort of 5 or so minutes of my presentation. I'd love to know, for you, what work circumstances are likely to push you into the fixed mindset? Is it specific people at work? Is it specific tasks that you might avoid because they feel like challenges? What are the obstacles that you might face? Can you imagine what might lead you to kind of slip back into a fixed mindset? One for me, as you guys sort of write this stuff down, one for me has been receiving criticism from managers in the past. Now, receiving negative feedback is never enjoyable, but I definitely have experienced like feeling micromanaged, and that every single thing I've done has received a comment. And I think looking back, I responded to that in quite a fixed mindset way. I was quite resentful of receiving feedback so regularly and so like intensely that I would push it all away and say that it was all wrong, it was all negative, rather than actually being curious to lean in and to see if that was right. Doing my accounts, yeah, that would lead me into the fixed mindset as well, whoever write that. Challenging my boss, yep. It's hard, isn't it, to challenge up and for those who are in positions above us in terms of responsibility. I can definitely relate there. Unrewarded initiative, absolutely. I can imagine then that's like, what's the point in trying if someone's not going to see or reward my effort? Bullying, I'm seeing that come up a little bit. Absolutely, bullying is not something to be stood for, and absolutely can push us into that fixed mindset headspace. Domineering personalities, not meeting deadlines, absolutely, that's sort of creating stress. Another one for me was others being promoted over me for roles and going for interviews internally and then not getting the job, but having to work with those same colleagues over and over again, and sort of comparing yourself to them because you didn't get the job. This is really helpful. Thank you guys for posting this. Yeah, unrewarded initiative, not being challenged enough. Okay, well, we're going to move on from this. So where do you think you most need or most want to develop, in those 5 areas that we looked at? So embracing challenge, persisting in the face of setbacks, those were those obstacles, seeing effort as a path to mastery, so putting in the hard work and the time, learning from criticism, so that would be around feedback, and finding lessons and inspiration in the success of others. There's an option there for Menti to vote. Be really interested to see for those here in the virtual room today, where you sort of see the next step really for growth mindset. So it seems like persisting in the face of setbacks is one that's coming out as a very common theme here. Yeah, I can really relate to that. Facing obstacles and not feeling like you're getting breakthrough, it can be very disempowering and can definitely initiate some of those fixed mindset self-talk pieces that I mentioned before. Embracing challenge and learning from the success of others also coming through similarly there. It's really interesting that, yeah, that effort piece, that's relevant for some, but actually for a lot of us, we probably feel like we are putting in the effort that's needed, but it starts with our mentality and what we're sort of telling ourselves. So I want to introduce you just to one final model, one final image, called the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and the panic zone. You may have seen this before. You probably have heard of the comfort zone before. And our comfort zone is a good place, is where we spend most of our lives personally and probably professionally as well. It's a stable place, it's a safe place, it's secure. But if we live completely in our comfort zone, there's also some negative associations that can come through, like being bored, unchallenged, too comfortable. And the comfort zone and the fixed mindset, they do come together when we're thinking about challenge. And actually, I'd rather stay in my comfort zone than venture out. The panic zone there on the very edge is also not a very nice place to be. It's probably worse than the comfort zone, let's face it. Being stressed, tired, potentially burnt out, exhausted, anxious, fearful, tense. And this is what can happen when potentially, Denzel Washington was saying fall forward, but we fall forward too far and we're a little bit too ambitious with the stretch that we set ourselves. And what I'd love to leave you with today is this stretch zone piece. And actually, the stretch zone is the growth mindset. The growth mindset isn't the panic zone. It's not about stretch yourself as hard and as far as you can, because you will just keep failing and you probably won't see any progress. But actually the stretch zone is just on the cusp of our comfort zone. It will feel uncomfortable, but it won't be impossible. And when we are working from that stretch zone, or when we're living our relationships personally in that stretch zone, we're going to feel challenged, we're going to feel excited, potentially exhilarated and alive, but it's also going to be a place that's safe to risk, or at least is safer to risk than that panic zone. So hold that analogy and this picture in your mind. And this final question that I want to sort of ask today is to get really action orientated. So being specific, getting specific. What action will you commit to that's going to help you to develop the growth mindset in your chosen area of development? This could be speaking to a colleague, speaking to that boss that's domineering, that doesn't listen. This could be choosing to reach that item in your inbox that you've just pushed down because you're like, I don't want to deal with that right now. It can be so many things. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Love that. Giving yourself permission, right, to be uncomfortable and say that actually, the more I do this, the easier it's going to feel. Learning to listen. Believe in my own potential and challenge myself to get out of the comfort zone. So much of it is in our heads. Before we act, we need to get clear on what's going on in our mind, essentially, with this self-talk. Stop and think before I react. And that's a really nice counterbalance. Sometimes action is needed. Sometimes we need to think a little bit and make a strategy before we act. Stretching myself to achieve goals and the objective. Being persistent. Don't put off that difficult task. Ending procrastination. I can relate to that one for sure. Challenging those around me to progress together. Love this one. Do it with other people. Go on a journey together. Don't necessarily feel like you're on your own. Get out of that panic zone. Absolutely. If that's you, I challenge you, what can you do today to get out of that panic zone? Keep researching, keep pushing to raise the bar little by little. Take the next learning opportunity. Absolutely. And learning can happen anywhere. It can happen on the job. It can happen through people that we work with. There can be books, resources, training, but most of it happens in our day-to-day interactions. All right. We'll keep adding to this. This is like a really helpful collage to be gathering. Holly, I'm going to hand back to you now because that's all I've got in terms of content, but I think we've got time for any questions.
Thank you for that, Matt. It was really, really interesting. And thank you to everyone else for participating as well and sharing your thoughts with us today. And
Yeah,
yes, I do
you.
remember the Space Jam movie. And I am also very, very surprised that it's 20 years since the first Harry Potter movie. Surely it's 20 years since the book, not the movie. Crazy. But yeah, we have
crazy.
got 8 minutes or so now for some questions, and we have had
Sure.
some come through whilst the presentation was on from some of the participants, so I'll get straight to those if that's okay. So
sure.
the first is, let me just get these up. Is growth mindset another way of expressing, and the phrase that's been used here is tough-mindedness, but perhaps resilience? Does it show resilience if you have and embrace the growth mindset?
Essentially, yes. Grit, resilience, toughness. It's that never say die, never give up attitude. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, that our brain actually molds as we choose to kind of not give up and not give in. It does change. In sort of the last 15 years, this concept of neuroplasticity has become more conventional and known, and that's something you can Google and read up about. But our brain essentially creates a new pathway when we make a new habit, choose a new action, and the more that we do that, the stronger that pathway becomes. What it also does is it weakens the previous pathway. So if you're someone that's given up like a lot in the face of challenge, that pathway is going to be quite a known response. It's going to be quite easy to sort of just fall into that pattern. But that grit, that resilience that you're talking about, is something that we can learn, and that's because our brain is essentially a bit like plasticine, which is disgusting to think about, but it's quite cool. It can be molded and changed and shift, which I think is really encouraging. So yeah, absolutely, it's linked to resilience.
Okay, brilliant. And another question is, how do you tackle negative minds within your team? You can obviously be very self-aware of your own mindset, but how do you help change that of others?
Yeah, that's really challenging, right? Because what we can control, even with ourselves, is limited. But when it comes to other people, like it's more what we can influence than what we control. All I can speak to is what we do in our team at Acre Frameworks, and we've used a few tools that are helpful. There's a psychologist called Shazad Shameen, and he's sort of come up with this positive intelligence sort of terminology in his research, and he has this like questionnaire that you can do called your saboteurs questionnaire. It takes about 5 minutes to do. If you Google positive intelligence saboteurs, it comes up, and it helps to like prompt the sort of hidden areas that might show up that are like our saboteurs, that are our blockers essentially. So for me, it's like a perfectionist. I just feel like I have to do stuff right, and also it's pleasing people and being so eager to keep others happy that sometimes I get in my own way. So what we did as a team is we all committed to doing that, and then we shared our saboteurs with each other. So there was like a beginning of a conversation around maybe some of those areas that we are blind to, but because we were all doing it, there was permission for all of us to be honest and open. So I suggest like finding a tool essentially that's going to provide a language to do that, because otherwise it can be quite difficult to sit down in the meeting. Right, let's all talk about our weaknesses. Where are we in the fixed mindset?
Yeah. Definitely. And then this isn't a question, but it's a comment from one of the participants. So they've just reflected on one of their own experiences, and they've shared that I remember a course which the following comment was made: fail is the first attempt in learning. And this participant, Mark, agrees. And it's not so much to fail, but it's being under the required performance, I guess. And he's just shared it's only by applying further time and resources that you can rise to the challenge. So I guess it's kind of drawing on that diagram that you showed prior to this slide. You want to stretch yourself, but not so much that you're super stressed or anything.
For sure, and I'd agree with that. And the only thing I'd add to that is where possible, like bringing your line manager or a colleague into that journey of development. I know that's might be quite a minefield for some of you to hear that, but to have an open conversation with someone who might be able to help you to fail well at work is a really empowering thing to do. I know it's not always possible, but if it is possible, it is worth doing.
Okay, and then I've got a question to finish with. So it's how does being in the growth mindset really affect long-term change?
So it is that kind of neuroplasticity, as I mentioned before, that kind of how choosing those new neural pathways do shift our long-term thinking. It's also how it changes our habits. There's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I would also highly recommend as very easy reading, but very relatable around this. And James Clear talks about something called micro habits. These are like very easy, small wins that you can make. For example, I want to read more. Okay, well, if you want to read more, don't say, oh, I'm going to read a book each week, because that's actually quite a lot of reading if you're going from a place of doing nothing. But if you say, well, I'm going to read 1 page a day, it's very achievable and it's likely that you're going to do it. And actually, you might read more than that page on that day, and then you've exceeded that habit. But all of a sudden, you're developing this small habit, this marginal gain that's going to kick forward that neuroplasticity. So yeah, I would say think about your habits, James Clear.
Okay, great. Let me just check to see if we've got any other questions that we can get to now. There's just another comment actually. The book The Chimp Paradox is also a great resource for growth that somebody has recommended here. Okay.
Amazing. I'm making a note of that.
Yep, it's great to share all these resources that we can use. Thank you so much today, Matt, for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. It was really interesting, and I hope everyone else enjoyed it too. And as I said before, thank you to everyone for participating as well and sharing your experiences and thoughts with us.